Blue skies means fun days. Helping skydivers with tips and techniques about safety, training and fun jumping from those who know. Welcome to this episode of Blue Skies Fun Days. If anyone mentions the name of Shane Sparks in Australia, this is the face that pops into most people's minds. A bit of a fun-loving ex-larrikin who loves skydiving and recording images in freefall, and he's been jumping for over 40 years. Recently, he was awarded our Australian Master of Parachuting, the highest honour we can give to a skydiver in Australia. So what is it that drives Sparksy? One character feature that came out strongly while chatting was a mix of his love for the people he shares the sky with and his ability to bring teams together to get the needed shots for either commercials or movies. Hopefully you will find this discussion with Sparksy as inspiring as those of us who have known and jumped with him for more decades than we'd probably want to admit.
I said I was flabbergasted. I didn't know what to think. I thought it was going to be given to someone else when I was online. It was online, of course, in 2021. I felt very honoured and humbled, and with a little bit of thought, I stopped and thought how many people were part of that award. Really, at the end of the day, it's an award that goes out to a lot of people, not just me. I think I'm the one who's had the camera on most of the time or been organising that. It belongs with a lot of people, and a lot of people who are way better than me. I first got into jumping in a spectator sense. I saw some films. I saw the Gypsy Moths one night on Sunday night TV in 1975, which sort of knocked me out as a teenager. In 1980, I was working at a government photographic department as a photographer, and one of the junior guys there, and they were all going. The team there were going skydiving on the weekend, and I opened my mouth, and before you know it, I'm there at Labatouche with them on Saturday and Sunday. Yeah. I went through the student progression very slowly. It took me 18 months to get my A licence, and I still sign my people's logbooks with my A licence number because that was a hard one. I was initially reasonably, a bit frightened, but with a little bit of careful confidence. I was 18 years old, only just got a motorbike and started skydiving, so that was a new world of risk. We did the first 2 static line jumps, then 3 what we call dummy ripcord pulls, or practice ripcord pulls, that might get called now. And if you do 3 of them in a row on the same day as your last one, you can do your first free fall. And that's a notable jump because, and it took me a number of years to realise that although I sort of launched off and went unstable and probably deployed half on my back, on my side or whatever, I passed the jump, and I passed it for one simple reason, is that I pulled the ripcord. That's what I had to do. If there was one thing I had to do, I had to pull my main ripcord. After that, it got more complicated and a little bit terrifying, and that was one of the reasons why it took me so long to get my licence. But on the weekend, I was a working photographer, so I was shooting weddings on the weekend. It sort of conflicts with the drop zone times. In 1989, summer of 89, I had clocked over my 4,000th jump. I lost all of my logbooks. I didn't actually number them, but I'd estimate 6,000, and I've estimated that for the last 10, 15 years. But look, I've got a good 5,000, 6,000 and some. It was looser in the sense that the parachutes weren't as fast. There weren't as many people in the air. It's much the same as older people who've been driving for 40 years, or say back in the 80s, there weren't as many cars on the road. That's a fact. There's not as many skydivers in the air in Australia, at least the smaller places back in the 80s. So it was looser in the sense it was more open and not as congested, for want of a better word. But as far as being loose, you could go and rip into anything and do anything any way you wanted to. At the end of the day, gravity and the ground rules. And I recall the first time I was grounded, I went low. I was photographing a low exit, 4,000 foot exit, And there's a clear shot of the guy who passed by me. He didn't take grips, but he passed by us at 2,500 feet. And then I did what I was trained to do, was turn a track for 6 seconds. And I opened way low. And Chief Instructor Colin Holt on the day sort of took me aside, sort of humiliated me in front of a few people because I'd made a deal of myself, and grounded me for 3 weeks. And I didn't get away with that at all. What I got from that was an invite back. I didn't even do more than 1 day of grounding. Colin called me back up and said, next weekend, get on down, get back in the air. This is not a penalty to ostracise you. This is to teach you, and it taught me, it kept me in line, and still has. Well, I was a photographer when I started jumping. When I was 18, I thought it would be good to have a couple of pictures of parachuting in my portfolio. I went down on a weekend and did my first jump course. And photography was, I was a stills photographer. I left school pretty early and worked in studios when I was 16. And I also studied photography. I've done a lot of courses. I've never gotten a degree or anything like that. I've gotten halfway to getting a degree, but that led to a position that was sort of photographic skydiving, directly related with the National Safety Council, search and rescue company, and they had a broad need for photographic documentation of tests, and all the way through to the 4-way team that they sponsored. I was their cameraman for most part of it. That got me into professional skydiving photography. Yeah. Professional being, mind you, that's your profession, you earn money from it. Doesn't mean you're better. There's a lot of better amateurs out there that are fantastic. Because of my photographic, being a photographer, you sort of do that. And I was inspired by people around us, the pictures that I'd seen, and I'd seen The Gypsy Moths, which is a classic film. Seen Masters of the Sky, Carl Bonish's masterpiece, and all the while you look at these pictures, whether it be films or pictures or whatever, you say, how did they get those shots? And I do that sort of thing on the ground in the studio. As you keep on jumping and you put a camera on your head, well, my first freefall photo was actually taken of a young lady, Lisa Hewison, and she went out and jumped, and I was underneath and looking up at her, and she was over the top looking down at me, and I had my Olympus OM1 on my chest strap and hit the button. So yeah, it wasn't on my helmet to start with. We did chest strap mounted stuff and handheld, and then I'll go one by one, develop it. There's no straight answer to that. I think of all the great pictures that I've seen taken by people in Andy Keach's fabulous book Sky's Call, for example. There's a lot of photographs in there taken by skydivers who became photographers, and also the other way around, photographers who became skydivers. I think that you need to have a good grounding in both. I've taught a lot of camera work in the time that I've had, and I have always basically said you dissect it into 4 sections: photographic and skydiving techniques and equipment, and you have to have a good grounding in all of them to be able to put cameras up in the air and reliably deliver and safely deliver pictures. Well, it was slow for me because the digital cameras, the first digital camera that ever got by definition is a Sony DV, mini DV camera, which is digital videotape. It was produced a standard definition picture of, which was really not much better than any analog picture, but it had the benefits of digital acquisition and the quality of transfer that digital gave, and of course onto videotape. The stills photography transition was the first thing that happened. The transition is really not that difficult because at the end of the day the principles of photography are the same. It's just that instead of recording onto a piece of film, you're recording onto a sensor, and it's being electronically recorded onto a card. The lens that creates that picture and the light that comes through the lens and the action in the air, that remains timeless. It's like getting a new iPhone. At the end of the day, it's the same thing, but it's a little bit different. There's a few more bells and whistles with each new progression of imaging. Digital cinematography, that was again that turned around the 35mm camera that I've got here. It's a 35mm motion picture camera in Arriflex, and that was made in 1952, by the way. The new digital cameras that we used the first serious digital camera I used was a Red Epic. It was a 5K digital cinema camera. Yeah, as big as any 35mm film camera, really. At the end of the day, the lenses were basically 35mm lenses adapted to the Red digital camera. There's a lot of teething problems with new technology. We found the transition digital cinema initially was a little difficult because they weren't as reliable as turning a film camera on and it runs flawlessly. Yeah, that was 2011-12. 10 years later, the digital cinema cameras, the high-end ones, are amazing, fantastic. Yeah. Why would you want to go back? And because there's a good reason to go back, is because the film has a certain look about it, and I still run a 35mm film camera ready to go. Exposure latitude that we used to talk about, which has been around since the black and white classics of Ansel Adams, all that sort of thing. Exposure latitude is now referred to as dynamic range, and the dynamic range on cameras is increasing, not crazily, but it's gradually increased to the point where you do have a lot of range. There's an optimum exposure. You still have to get the exposure right. For example, you've got plus or minus 200% where you've got a totally workable option. But the moment you go any way past your desired perfect exposure, you're compromising the picture and the post-production possibilities. So really, at the end of the day, the editors and the graders and all the people further down the pipe of any production, if you give them overexposed pictures and they're pulling their hair out, well, you quickly become a bad taste in their mouth. Yeah. Each camera and each sensor and recording device is different, and it's a discussion that you have with directors of photography who are shooting other stuff on a production, for example. You need to know where the people other than yourself need it to go. It's a discussion. You work out what the best thing is. Well, my camera helmet didn't cost me much, and that's basically a ProTech. And I love it, and it works well. It looks very rudimentary, but it works extremely well. The photographic equipment, how long is a piece of string? They'll ask. I've always had a pretty high investment in photographic gear. Like a full set of Nikon lenses costs a bomb. A full set of Zeiss lenses that I use for cinema work costs a bomb. The 35mm Arriflex in the back there, that was probably in total with all of the modifications and purchase and all that, it's a $10,000 camera back in the mid-1990s. It cost an absolute fortune, and every time I go and hire stuff these days, I'm mindful that there's anywhere between $100,000 and $250,000 on my head on a $25 ProTech hat. Pretty ironic, but the personal investment, I've invested as much as I possibly can. Today, for example, in-house I've got a 6K Blackmagic digital cinema camera and lots of Nikons and a bag full of GoPros. They cover most of what I need. A 4K camera you can get for under $500. It's in just about every stills camera. You get it in your phone. Not all 4K is the same as the other, of course. There are different qualities to acquiring pictures. That's a resolution 4K, of course. As far as cost goes, relative costs, my first digital camera that I got was a mini DV camera, and the price is $3,000 and a bit. You're looking at 10 weeks' wages to get a digital video camera. The 6K Blackmagic camera, which is a well-priced, serious piece of equipment, costs as little as $3,000, same price. That's 2 weeks' wages for some people, less for others. And the comparison between what you had to invest, time and money-wise, was significant. But you've got reusable media, you've got cards, and of course you have to invest in hard drives and all that sort of thing to store it. But storage is cheap. Relative to a roll of 35mm motion picture film, or in my case, right up until 2009, when I went digital on stills, I was shooting a roll of film every jump, and that costs, it cost as much as a jump again to photograph each jump. Worked on a lot of various commercials and movies over the time. My first work that professional work I've mentioned as with the National Safety Council, as basically a asset photographer for their search and rescue department. Commercial wise, I've done a number. My very first commercial was one for Coca-Cola, called the Sky Surfer, and that was a pretty big deal in the day. It was 31 years ago now. We shot it in 1991, and by we I mean it was Ray Palmer, the Sky Surfer, Gary Cunningham was another Sky Surfer, Steve Whalen, Hilly and Onus up in Sydney Skydivers. Mick Kelleher also was another cameraman. I was what they call these days the aerial director of photography, which is a mouthful, but that's sort of, you create and come up with ideas and direct the shots in the air. That was my role. Mick and I did some nice work, and it was my first TV commercial of any note, and it was a worldwide ad campaign, so it was a pretty good job to be on. Yeah, it went a long way to creating a discipline. Patrick Degaudon and Patrick Pass from France, they initially wanted to use those guys. They were jumping, virtually snowboards. Ray Palmer and the guys, they surfed surfboards out. Ray's was 6'1", 18 inches wide. Never been done before or after that I know of. And to be out there flying around this extraordinary moment was just gobsmacking and a bit dangerous too at times. Yeah, it created a discipline, had a long-lasting life. I don't think sky surfing is part of the World Championships any longer. And one of the great things that I've had is one of Australia's great sky surfers, Rob Simonek, told me while we were shooting a job with him sky surfing that what got him into jumping was the sky surfing material that we'd shot. I've done a lot of films, not as many as I would like. They've all ranged from being pretty straight commercial sort of films. A recent one was a skydiving sequence in Peter Rabbit. I shot something for a film called Danny Deckchair, which is an Australian feel-good film from the early 2000s. There was a really big project going back in 94, 95, the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and the opening scenes for that film, which was, it was a $50 million film, the biggest film that had ever come to Australia at that point in time, and still one of the biggest. We shot the opening scenes, and that was, we had 3 cameras running on that. It was myself and Dave Wright and Craig Field and a team of skydivers that were fantastic, doing what the Power Rangers do, and that was quite incredible. Yeah, all shot on 35mm film, the standard gauge. A lot of people, when they get asked questions like that, say, "Don't do it." Well, I say mine's opposite. I've had this before the Nike slogan, just do it. Whenever you got something that you're passionate about, just do it. Make it happen for the right reasons and put your heart and soul into it. That's really the first bit of advice, is to make it happen. Tips for people starting out is to be, if you're passionate about it, make it happen. When you get a camera on your head, most important piece of equipment that you will have, which is vital, is a Newton ring sight. A good sight will make the difference between being able to frame and not being able to frame. If your pictures aren't in frame, forget about it. A Newton ring sight is 100%. I got one for my 21st birthday. Great present. Have a mindset to do something with the point of difference, because there's a lot of people doing the same thing. My point of difference, I've got a few quirky bits about myself, but one of the big things that I've always had is that I've been able to do things a little bit differently to what everyone else is doing, and doing things the way other people, for example, who are paying me, want them. Be prepared to step outside your normal box, and don't underestimate the safety aspect of it. That's the most important thing. If you want to get into freefall photography, be prepared to think outside the box, and most importantly, always do it safely. Consider that safety factor, the risk factor. Do it properly.
For more tips and techniques, click subscribe.